Welcome to Rewired Sober, the podcast that breaks down the real reasons women turn to alcohol. Spoiler alert, it wasn't a character flaw. It was your neurobiology, your conditioning, and the systems that taught women to silence themselves instead of support themselves. I'm your host, Kate Vitella. I've been a registered nurse for well over 2 decades, trained in addiction and mental health, a bit neuroscience obsessed, but spiritually grounded. This is the science and soul work of a woman's recovery, where I help you understand what's happening in your sober brain and reconnect to that deeper inner truth you've always had, that soul level knowing, the intuition the patriarchy has tried to train out of you. When women combine the science of the brain rewiring with that inner knowing, you stop feeling broken and you start feeling powerful. So let's get into it. Welcome back to Rewired Sober. Today I'm going to talk about a part of sobriety that feels confusing. Well, the whole damn thing feels confusing, but this part particularly, because it also feels a little lonely. And it's the part where alcohol no longer fits in your life. And you know it, right? You know it doesn't fit. But life without it still feels unfamiliar and kind of weird. And this is what we're calling a liminal space. In real life, it's the messy middle. And this is sort of a space where you want something to be different. It's a threshold, but it's not a dead end, but it's not different yet. So you don't force the clarity here. You just listen, you get curious, and you let the wanting catch up with the knowing. And if you're sober curious and you haven't even started your journey yet, or maybe you're kind of in and out, you don't really even have to go all the way in. You just have to start telling the truth about what no longer fits if you're in that liminal space. That's the part, that's the crack where the change comes in. So I want to play for you a clip from last week's Rewired Sober coaching group. And of course, my group has journal prompts to go along with this and unpack it a bit further and discuss real life examples. But I felt like this was important enough. I wanted to show it to my audience here. So take a listen to the Rewired Sober recording. Today, what I want to talk about is the liminal space, sort of why you feel left out, bored, sad, or whatever, and why this is actually a good sign. So we're talking about phases of sobriety, and a phase that everyone goes through, but maybe we don't quite articulate it or put it into words like this, is that there's this stretch where you feel a little left out, maybe bored, sad, restless, or irritated, or unmotivated, or out of place is really the best way to describe it. And a little bit like you're watching your own life from the outside. And it's not as black and white as saying it's depression. It's not failure. It's not as black and white as saying the sobriety's not working. It's just a phase that you're in. And it has a name. And the name for this really is liminal space. You're in a liminal space. Okay, so what the hell is that? And many of you have probably heard of this, but if not, let's put it into some context. Liminal space, it comes from the Latin word limen or limen, however you say it. It just means threshold. Essentially, it can mean like a rite of passage. It's that in between. It's the hallway, the part after the old thing has ended, but before the new part begins. You're not really who you were before, and you're not really who you're becoming either. You're just in that hallway, standing there waiting in line with your hands in your pockets going, okay, like Now what, right? Or what am I supposed to do right here? And a couple of quotes I like on liminality, they help this make a bit more sense. Richard Rohr, he's an American priest and the author of many books, he says, liminal space is where transformation happens, but it never feels like transformation when you're in it. And I think this is so fitting. Richard Rohr, he wrote the book Falling Upward. And like, let's be real, that's kind of what the sober journey feels like, right? And the premise of that book is how exploring in the first half of our life, our failures, our disappointments, all the lessons, maybe the wrong turns we made, and the right turns, some of it all together, weaved into a tapestry. It ends up being stepping stones to spiritual growth and a deeper personal understanding in the second half of our life. And I find this so fitting for midlife women. And that's why, in a weird sense, you'll hear people saying in 12-step rooms, maybe even in meetings and online, they're a grateful alcoholic. Now, I don't use the term alcoholic, but because 12-step recovery has been around the longest, that's probably a term that you'll hear, grateful alcoholic. And what that's alluding to is this overall journey of drinking. Without it, without this detour, we wouldn't have entered into recovery to meet the truest and the most evolved version of ourselves. Now, here's something I never thought I would say out loud is I'm actually grateful for the drinking path I went down. Not for the destruction, right? Not for the chaos, the mistakes, the financial, all the icky. That part sucked, but for the reconstruction. Because I certainly would not be this badass woman that I am today without any of that. I would not be that. And when I say badass, I don't mean like I'm out here crushing life. I'm perfect. I have perfect routines. I wear matching Lululemon workout sets. That's not what I mean. I mean spiritually solid. I mean, I am a woman who's grounded, who's full of love, and I'm certain of my worth. I'm confident, I'm becoming, and I'm capable in ways that the old version of me really never believed I could be. Sobriety didn't turn me into a badass because I became like tougher. It turned me into a badass because I finally met myself. A quote that sums this up really well is from Megan Watterson, one of my favorite women, feminist theologian. She says, there is nothing more powerful than a woman who's met the truth inside her. Nothing. Now, that doesn't mean this isn't hard as shit, because it is. There's also an old anonymous quote about liminality. Nothing ever grows without a season of discomfort. And I think a lot of us can, track that for sure. And to bring this back to liminality as a concept, we're in this space between no longer, we're not drinking anymore, and not yet. And the soul finally gets a voice here. And people started studying and researching this concept of liminality in many aspects of life. It's not just an Instagram spiritual buzzword. It became a documented concept because researchers across different fields were seeing patterns, right? The same emotional pattern showing up in major life transitions. Anthropologists saw it as a rite of passage. Sociologists saw it in major changes in people's lives, divorce, grief, loss of a loved one, a career change, right? Major change. Psychologists saw it when we're making identity shifts. And a lot of spiritual teachers refer to this during spiritual awakenings. Now, all of this leads to the same cycle. All these angles, you go through this phase of like disorientation, waiting, discomfort, and then the identity shift. And so this pattern, this liminality, it's part of predictable human change. And why does this matter? Because if you don't know what liminal spaces are and you don't start to hold some reverence for them, in a really weird, fucked up way, you think something's wrong with you. But once you understand liminality, you look at it sort of like, oh, I'm not broken. I'm transitioning. And let me add something personal here, because a big part of the way that I coach the way I do, there was a long time in my recovery that I didn't believe I could change that much. I honestly didn't think I was allowed to change. I had this internal script that said, once you hit adulthood, that's it. You're concrete. That's who you are. People know you as this version. Don't rock the boat. And I wasted a lot of time trapped in that story. Even fragments of my drinking self, the self-doubt, the years of internalized shame, and thinking other people are allowed to evolve, but not me. They know me in the community. I stayed stuck because I didn't trust myself, and I didn't believe that the world would let me change my story, especially coming from a woman who started in 12-step recovery, and certain narratives in that common lexicon of 12-step recovery. When I got out of that and started studying my own things and devoting my time to other areas of recovery, and then when I started coaching, it was like, ooh, that's when I throw in the plot twist. And I completely rewrote who I was from the inside out. And I realized, oh, I'm allowed to evolve. And once I realized that, everything cracked open, because I became more obsessed with movement, not perfection, growth, not living the same year over and over and over, and not reading the same books over and over and over, doing the same shit. I became more focused on understanding my brain, so I could stop fighting myself and understanding how I could listen to my own soul voice. So here's what I want you to take away from today is these liminal spaces. Well, they don't just happen once. They show up all throughout our sobriety journey, all throughout our life. But I want to encourage you to start welcoming them, because the goal is not to stay the same. Human beings were not designed to be static. We're meant to evolve. And the nudge that brought you to a liminal space, you're in this hallway because something inside you whispered, that version of me is not working anymore. Not just the drinking, the people pleasing, the shrinking, numbing, over functioning, the hiding, the exhaustion, right? All of that. The pain under your drinking wanted to be healed here. And that's what brought you here. So honor that. Now, the brain and neuroscience piece, the reason why you feel a little off in this time is, in a liminal space, your brain has sort of pruned away all the old pathways, the drinking habits, the numbing patterns, but it hasn't quite finished building the new ones yet. So you don't necessarily feel grounded because your brain literally isn't that grounded yet in your new patterns. Your neural mapping is still under construction. It's neuroplasticity in progress, and that's the premise of rewiring. That's what rewiring feels like. So the soul piece of this, what I love, is the portal. Here's the soul part. The middle space is not a void. It's not this lost, deep, dark spot. Think of it as a portal, as a passageway. Your old identity, it can't follow this path. Your new one can. And it's uncomfortable because everything that was true in your life is rearranging. It might even come at you quiet because your true voice is starting to get some airtime. It might feel lonely because not everyone from your old life is meant to walk through this next door with you. It might feel boring because your nervous system is detoxing from chaos and overstimulation. We've talked about this. It might feel sad because sometimes grief is the toll you pay when you stop abandoning yourself. And I look at this time like this trinity of feeling left out, bored, and sad. And I want to talk about some of those big feelings that hit really hard. You feel left out because you're losing your old life and you're outgrowing the rooms that you used to fit in. Maybe you feel bored because your dopamine reward system is recalibrating. Not because sobriety is boring, but you got to listen to my podcast episode on that. But your brain's rebuilding. And maybe you feel sad because there is real grief in grieving the woman that you were, and a lot of the parts about yourself that maybe you pretended to be. And none of this means you're doing it wrong. None of this means you're doing sobriety wrong. It just means you're alive, you're waking up, you're transforming. And so how do we do this? How do we work within this phase? Like so many other pathways I've described, you name it. I'm in the liminal space. I'm in the hallway. And you stop expecting it to feel perfect. You stop expecting it to feel good, because change is scary, right? Maybe it's not supposed to feel good. You get curious, and curiosity will get you through that doorway. And you can let this phase be slow, be awkward, be uncertain, be quiet, be weird. And that's how identity shifts happen. So the reframe here is, maybe you're feeling left out, bored, sad, whatever, unmotivated. And that just means you've stopped abandoning yourself and you're not stuck. You're not going backwards, but you're in a transition. So I want to reframe liminal spaces, not as punishment, but as an invitation to the portal. And just understanding that we're in liminality. One of my recovery teachers early on said, get to those liminal spaces as often as you can, because that means you're getting ready to level up to the next phase of growth. Not necessarily like in a linear way, like up level, boss bitch, but like there's new parts of you that need to be discovered, and to encourage that growth. Because it's scary. It can be scary until you start stepping into it. But I want to normalize that. Is that we all go through it, and we go through it at various parts of our recovery. It's not like you go through the portal and you're like, I'm there. Woohoo! Where's my gold star? As various phases of your recovery go on, you go through various phases of other liminal spaces. I had a hard liminal space at like year 6 to 7-ish sobriety, where I was like, wow, I've got some serious spiritual searching here that I had kind of pushed aside in early recovery, while I didn't have the bandwidth to even worry about any of that woo-woo stuff. I was just trying to stay alive. So you're at the threshold of your new identity. It's not punishment. And I encourage you to stay. And when you are ready, that next door will open. So that's what I have for you today. Quick pause here, folks, because some of you might be listening to this and thinking, okay, I'm on a sober journey, but I still feel stuck. Yeah, that's normal. Removing the alcohol is one thing. Rewiring the brain, rebuilding your actual life is the real work. And that's why I created the Rewired Sober coaching program. It's 3 months where we combine neuroscience, soul work, with weekly live support calls so you can actually understand what's happening in your head and your body. You can start anytime, you get immediate access, and you don't have to figure this all out alone. If you're ready for transformation, the link to join is in the show notes, and I hope to see you there. Now back to the show. Sometimes this shows up in our sobriety, like real life times we're in liminal spaces. I'm going to give some examples here that I can think of that really sort of stood out to me. First is going to social events without alcohol, without a buzz. At first, this is weird, right? You walk in, you're clear-headed, and things are different. You're not used to this, but you're going to leave the event really proud. And somewhere in the middle, you think, is this what it is? You're not craving the alcohol. You're missing that social shortcut, the false confidence, the ability to disappear a little. And you haven't quite yet learned how to do that connection thing without numbing. It takes time for this translation to occur in your mind of, okay, this is the right choice, but these are just unfamiliar muscles and we've got to get there. And it takes repetition in this. Evenings and weekends, you can feel kind of this weird liminal space, and you can feel emotions in early sobriety that are really kind of awkward. Another example I can think of where this really hit me was I was outgrowing friendships. I didn't hate anyone. I didn't exclude. It was just I knew it was time for change. And I didn't want to blow up relationships. I just didn't fit the same conversations anymore. This has happened several times on my sober journey. You can distance yourself from people without a lot of drama. But the in-between feeling is deeply liminal and it's deeply lonely. And the reason I bring this up is because so much of our journey feels like you can't go back and you don't really want to, but you feel sad about going forward and you're kind of confused. And it's not even because you want to drink, but now you see clearly. You can't unknow what you know. And that door has closed for a reason. But even necessary endings deserve some grief. And that's where the conversation around surrender comes in. We have to embody that a little bit on the way. If sobriety feels right, but it's strange, you're not stuck necessarily, you're just integrating. And liminal spaces aren't signs to go back. They're just signs you're becoming someone new. So what I want to leave you with is that the final truth about liminality is that you don't rush these liminal spaces. You listen to them. And this is where your nervous system is learning to live the truth without anesthesia. It's not a setback. Think of it as recalibration, right? Don't call it a comeback. I was never down. Okay, I was LL Cool J for a minute there, but you get what I mean. This is what change actually feels like. So why is this so freaking hard? Why is this so uncomfortable? Let's get into a little science here. Change is hard for everyone, but I'll use myself as an example. When I'm in an liminal space, I'm anxious. I talk about it a lot. I want to verbally process with people around me. I happen to ruminate. I get stressed. Sometimes I can't sleep. Sometimes I even get depressed because I don't, quote, have the answers. I want certainty. I want a roadmap. And that's just me being human. That is my nervous system's prime directive. You see, your nervous system is not designed to make you happy. It's designed to keep you alive. And it does that through one core value. Predictability equals safety. Not comfort, not health, not growth. Predictability. That's what keeps you safe. And that's why the brain prefers the devil we know. Even a bad habit gives the nervous system something crucial, something known, a known outcome, a familiar emotional arc to a situation, a predictable chemical response, right? Your alcohol, overworking, doom scrolling Instagram, people pleasing, anxiety spirals. They cost you, but they're reliable. We know what's going to happen. The nervous system thinks, I know how this ends. I've survived it before. It's probably good enough. Or, it's a familiar pain. And that's why people have a tendency to repeat patterns they hate. We stay with partners we hate. We stay at jobs we hate. Uncertainty feels threatening. And this unknown doesn't register as a neutral, to the nervous system. When we're coming into an unknown liminal space in our lives, it registers like, okay, this could be dangerous because you don't know how you're going to cope or who you're going to be on the other side or what even comes next. So your nervous system could flag it as, okay, no roadmap, no fucking proof, right? Besides people on Instagram, hashtag sober life is the best life, but there's no guarantee. And that can activate vigilance, anxiety, urgency, the need to figure it out. I can get up and dance on tables in the best outfit possible and tell you how I've had this hashtag sober glow up and my life's fucking awesome and everything's great. And you're still going to be anxious about it because you need proof. You need to experience it. And the urge to get an answer, to figure it out, it can almost feel kind of compulsive. But the urge to figure stuff out is a stress response. It's just self-protection. I've had to learn this and give myself grace about this over time because I really want to know how the story ends, right? Don't surprise me with shit. Don't give me a surprise trip or a surprise gift or an adventure. Tell me the end so that I can pack accordingly, right? And maybe that's because I'm a midlife woman and it takes me like a village to preserve my 46-year-old self at a hotel. Mostly I have to have snacks, okay? It's all about snacks and Red Bull. Okay, back to what I'm talking about. But the urge to figure it out, it's just self-protection. So give yourself some grace here. The nervous system says, if I can name it, solve it, decide what it is, lock it down, I'll be safe again. And maybe that's why sometimes we rush decisions or we overanalyze our sober journey. And sometimes I even hear people saying they've returned to alcohol. You call it a relapse, call it whatever you want, but just to stop the questioning, just to stop the cognitive dissonance, because it feels like so much work. I hear people saying, this is so much work, and they want to go back to old habits because at least they know how to function there. Not because they want to drink or not because they even want the habit, because we're human and we want the relief of certainty. So give yourself some grace here. Change feels scary even when it's good. Change can mean new sensations, new emotional timing, new identity cues. No stored memory of, I've survived this before. You don't have a roadmap. So your nervous system doesn't have the evidence. So even healthy change can trigger fear and doubt and second guessing and cognitive dissonance. And maybe I should go back, right? But that doesn't mean the change is wrong. It just means the evidence hasn't been installed in your operating system yet. And this is how habits actually get rewired. And this is the part people miss. The nervous system doesn't change through insight. In that case, we would read a book and be like, okay, I'm changed. I wish. It changes through repeated lived experience. It needs to learn. Okay, I can feel this and survive. I can tolerate not knowing. Or nothing bad happens if I don't escape. I will not get eaten by a tiger. And how do we do this? We stay in the fucking messy ass middle long enough for our system to recalibrate. Sometimes I call it sitting in our shitty diaper, which is why sitting in the unknown feels like work. It is work. It is work. And when someone says, I just want an answer, I just want to know, I hate this in between, I take that as them saying, my nervous system just wants proof that this is going to be safe. And your nervous system gets that proof from experience plus certain conditions around you, right? So here, I'll paint you a full, clean, usable picture here. Proof comes from repetition. One day sober doesn't do it. One insight from a book doesn't do it. It'll flip some switches. One day sober will show you some things. But the nervous system will learn by stacking evidence. I went to bed sober again. I felt uncomfortable and I didn't die. I felt uncomfortable. I didn't escape. Nothing bad happened. And repetition tells the body, this isn't a fluke. And the proof comes from the regulation over time. You can't learn safety while you're dysregulated. So that's why we breathe. We use purposeful movement. We get lots of sleep. We use food as fuel. We sit in stillness if we need to. These are not fluffy self-care ideas. These are neurobiological prerequisites. A regulated body can actually tolerate some uncertainty. But a dysregulated one will reach for the devil it knows. I mean, I feel like nervous system regulation has become like a pop psychology buzz term. Like everyone's talking about regulating your nervous system. But there's a reason for that. And it's so that you can learn to be safe. It's so that you can tolerate big change like this. And because we have to lay that groundwork first. And the proof also comes from choice. And I think this matters more than people realize. When you choose to pause instead of to react, to stay curious, that's my hashtag forever. When you choose to stay curious and you're okay with that instead of being certain with how things are going to work out, you remain present instead of numb. And your nervous system registers this as agency. Personal agency. And agency means safety. And that's why forced sobriety feels different than chosen sobriety. Anyone ever try to force you into a 12-step meeting or force you to not drink, dumps out your alcohol, hides it from you, threatens you? It doesn't work because it doesn't feel safe. That and hello, if you're anything like me, you want to fucking rebel as much as possible. But no, I need a sense of agency. I need a sense of choice. I need to be empowered that I'm doing this. The minute that I decided personally, I choose sobriety, it's like I never looked back. Now, 5 years leading up to that, I didn't choose. And my family tried everything. They tried taking away my debit card. They tried hiding my car keys. They tried threatening me. They tried shaming. They tried a intervention. They tried hiding the booze, not inviting me, all the things. Doesn't work. What worked is when I said, I choose this for myself. Essentially, I got sick and tired of being sick and tired. Back to self-trust, though. The proof comes from self-trust moments, even small ones. Even small ones, when you turn down the alcohol and you survive it, or you feel a craving or an urge and you get through it. You didn't obey that urge, or you honored a small boundary without over-explaining the shit out of yourself. These moments quietly install this notion that I can be trusted with myself again. And that's really huge for change. And that's huge for women. We aren't taught to trust ourselves. So this takes time. And that's why I encourage co-regulation. No nervous system heals in isolation. We need to be seen, to be understood. That is exactly why I started the Rewired Sober group, so that other women could be mirrored without judgment. Because I know the importance of co-regulation and healing in a group setting, saying things out loud. This is why community matters so much. It helps so much to say things out loud. We just get rid of those shame patterns. And the safe feeling of being in a group is pretty contagious. And proof comes from time. And I know this is the worst. I hate when people say time takes time. But it's kind of true. Your system does need time to realize that the danger isn't coming, the threat has passed, and the new pattern takes hold. And time isn't passive here. You're not just sitting back. It's integration time. The proof isn't coming from your thinking. It's coming from your repetition, your regulation, your choice, and time, and intention. And you live this long enough to feel safe. Safety is learned through experiencing things right up front and personal. Your body believes what you repeatedly survive. I think all this to say, you're not convincing your nervous system with words. You're teaching it by showing up over and over again. And it's unfamiliar until it no longer feels dangerous. This is what I hope you take away from this podcast, is that you will live in liminal spaces all throughout your recovery. It will be uncomfortable, but think of those as a portal to the next version of you. And like I said in the teaching, this is not about up leveling. We are not in a multi-level marketing. We are not level up boss babe. This is not hustle culture. This is just a portal to another layer of the onion, if you want to call it that, to getting closer to the truth, getting closer to the truest version of you. So I hope this made sense and it was helpful. I'd love for you to join my program and love to see you on the inside, because this is the kind of stuff we talk about and it is helping many, many women. So have an awesome day. Thanks for spending this time with me. I love you all so very much, and I mean it. You can find me on all the socials at Rewired Sober. The links to join my coaching program are always in the show notes, as well as an email if you want to get in touch with the pod. So until next time.